I thought what happened was a fluke. I thought it was a one-off thing, just one bad guy, but it just kept getting bigger and bigger.
Journalist Allie Conti booked an Airbnb in Chicago and ended up uncovering a massive scam.
I got a phone call a few minutes before we were supposed to check in saying the place was flooded and we weren't going to be able to go to the place. Thankfully, he invited us to stay at a much bigger place and implied that it was much nicer. We found out it was much bigger and definitely not much nicer only when we arrived. Basically, the way I described the place was as a flophouse. That's to say there was no real furniture, there was no forks and knives or plates or really any sign that people lived there. Everything was really dirty and gross. It was just 8 beds and a giant apartment complex, and that was all that there was. So it was very clear that no one actually lived in this place. We ended up staying there for 2 nights. We had booked 4 nights on Airbnb, and then the guy kicked us out, saying that other guests were coming and we were going to need to leave. And we decided to worry about getting a refund when we got home because we were in a different city where we didn't really know where we were, and it was just very stressful to deal with at the time.
The experience wasn't just stressful, it was expensive.
We booked our Airbnb for about $1,200, and after going back and forth with a bunch of case managers on Airbnb over the course of 2 weeks or so, I was able to get back about $400. And not only were we out the money that we gave Airbnb, we also had to book a hotel, so it ended up costing us a lot of money to get caught up in this scam. It's a classic bait and switch. You have photos on Airbnb that look really nice and seems too good to be true, and then it ends up being too good to be true because that place isn't actually available for rent.
After the incident, Conti decided to investigate.
When I got home and started looking into what happened, it became really obvious that this guy was not above board who we talked to. First of all, he called me from a Los Angeles number and we were in Chicago, so it was pretty obvious he wasn't like a local property owner. So I tried to do a reverse lookup for the phone number, found that it wasn't really a phone number, it was a Google number that someone had made, maybe that day or something, so it was not traceable. The person I allegedly rented from went by Becky and Andrew, a nice couple standing on the beach, holding hands, that kind of a thing. Like, who would be suspicious of that? But as it turns out, that was kind of their formula for creating these fake profiles, was to have a man and a woman's name and, photos that just looked too staged to actually be real, like a very Instagram-friendly kind of couple. Then I started looking at the photos and put them in Google search, did a reverse search, saw that they were coming up on surfing websites and stuff. And then started doing the same thing for some of the other profiles that had left them reviews. So I click on those, look up their photos, see that they were also stock photos.
So who was behind the curtains?
I tried extremely hard to get in touch with this person, as you might imagine. The closest I got was I called his property rental company that he had listed on LinkedIn, and I talked to someone who said his name was Patrick. Patrick seemed very concerned and afraid about the fact that I said I was reporting on this piece. He swore that he wasn't the person himself, but I don't know if this person actually existed. He wouldn't give me a last name. It's a mystery.
Conti wrote about her experience for Vice, and her article struck a chord.
I've heard from hundreds, if not more than 1,000 people who have said they've had similar experiences. So while I can't comment or speculate about the scope of this problem, it seems to be happening all over the world.
Law enforcement took notice.
The morning after it came out, I did get contacted by a member of the FBI who expressed interest in looking into this kind of fraud.
And Airbnb paid attention as well.
After the article came out and went viral and presented what I can only imagine was an enormous public-facing crisis for them, they did promise to verify all 7 million of their listings by the end of 2020. And it's unclear how they're going to do that. They haven't given a lot of detail about what their plans are for that, but evidently they're trying to fix the problem.
Conti says the company hadn't done enough to protect guests from these kinds of scams.
There's always risks when you're doing business with strangers, right? But historically, they haven't been much help when those kind of transactions go wrong. They kind of take a very hands-off approach and say, that's between the two of you, we just facilitate the communication. They don't actually do any of the policing that you would expect. If you had a bad experience at a hotel, there's a human being that you could go talk to and you know what you're supposed to get in terms of customer service. With a platform like Airbnb, that stuff doesn't really exist.
In a statement to InsideEdition.com, Airbnb said engaging in deceptive behaviors, such as substituting one listing for another or leaving fraudulent reviews, are clear violations of our community standards, and we take these reports very seriously. Based on the reported information, we have removed the hosts brought to our attention and will continue to investigate further. The company has reached out to Conti and her party to provide support to them. Airbnb CEO Brian Chesky recently announced the company is introducing consumer protections to prevent this sort of thing from happening again. These include an Airbnb guest guarantee, a 24/7 neighbor hotline, and expanded screenings of so-called high-risk reservations. The company also announced that it is banning quote-unquote party houses, following a deadly shooting at an Airbnb rental being used for a Halloween party in Orinda, California. So how can you protect yourself from online lodging scammers?
The safest thing you can do is book a hotel if you can afford it. If you can't afford it, I would just say really closely scrutinize the people leaving reviews for your host. They may be 5-star reviews, but are they actually real reviews? You need to click on those profiles and see if they themselves are property owners. They may also have 12 properties and be actually the host leaving themselves a review.
Hosts' profile images can also be a giveaway.
One tell that I found pretty common is the photos. I mean, you can do a reverse lookup, but also if people aren't showing their face. If they look very staged, a lot of the photos they were using were people with their head turned away from the camera. So that makes it harder for someone to call them out and be like, hey, you're using my photo. That's like one way to kind of get around that, is to not actually have somebody's face associated with the account.
Despite all the attention generated by her article, Conti says her phantom hosts may be back at it.
Since the article came out, some of their profiles have been shut down, but the scammer has started creating new ones. So I would just caution everyone to be careful out there, because I think that as many profiles as Airbnb shuts down, they're probably going to find a way to start the scam all over again.
Conti says her experience holds cautionary lessons for people in the so-called sharing economy.
The moral of this tale is that you just have to not necessarily trust these platforms in the same way that you would traditional services like a taxi cab service or a hotel service. With those services, you at least know what you're getting. They're regulated by the government in some way. With these services, they say that they're just platforms to connect people and that they're not actually, in the business of policing the behavior of people who use them. So just be extra careful, and if you can afford to use the ones that are regulated, you should.
As for Conti, it may be some time before she uses Airbnb again.
I walked away from the experience thinking maybe I would use Airbnb again. I don't think I plan on using it until they at least follow through on their promise to verify all their listings, and even then I'm going to want to make sure that they've actually done that. So we'll see.
This is InsideEdition.com.